obviously, but if this is your first time seeing me, I do funny shit, so enjoy.
Over this past year, I've been working on a personal project where I create a bunch of agents for the world of Valorant. I really
Hopefully you
devoted
guys can
myself to
hear.
this project.
Wait, hold up. I gotta make sure this song doesn't play because this is the one song that will get my entire video fucking taken down. Alright, Spotify's broken lit.
And in this video, I'm going to go over my process and how I got to the final result. So first, I kind of wanted to figure out a baseline for how Riot goes about designing their agents. What are some common themes that they base their characters around, and what are tropes that have already been hit in the game? I like to think about these things before I do the brainstorming phase, so I don't accidentally create an agent.
Good chat. Make me a Valorant character. If any of you guys are watching and a W artist, make me a Valorant
Too
character.
similar to one that's already in the game. Also, what are my deliverables?
Wait,
for
I
the
could
final
chat
project?
GPT that.
Of course, there's going to be character designs in there, but
Wait, hold on.
maybe movement or VFX sketches. Essentially, anything that Riot would do for an agent in Valorant, I want to make sure that I have that in my project as well. Something I noticed is a lot of agents are based around elements, so Jett obviously being the wind character, Phoenix being your fire character, and then I noticed a lot of agents are based around traditional gaming tropes, so Skye's your druid, Chamber's kind of like your sniper, marksman type of character. And then something else I noticed that I found kind of interesting is that a lot of agents fall under like a modern career. Brimstone's a military captain, Cypher's like a spy, KJ's a mechanic. I find that interesting because they take a trope that could be kind of boring in a somewhat contemporary setting, but they still manage to make the characters fun and interesting. And then my personal favorite avenue that they like to take sometimes is they like to implement supernatural creatures with a modern sci-fi twist.
Yeah.
For example, Reyna's literally a vampire and Omen's like a phantom or a ghost. But through unique design solutions, they're able to
That's
still
cool.
make them grounded and believable. So now that I've thought about all those things, I kind of want to get into brainstorming. I like to go to my sketchbook for this because it's kind of nice to get away from the computer and it's easier to just think
True.
about things. You can see right here, I'm listing out what's called established precedents. I learned about that from my mentor Scott. And essentially, I'm just
Nice.
listing out the characters that are in the game, so Sova, Jett, Phoenix, Omen. I'm just listing out the things that I think make the characters what they are. So for example, Sova, he's a hunter, he's got the bow and arrow, he uses electricity powers, and he's a marksman. Jett, she's a ninja, she's got throwing knives, and she's kind of like a windbender. Phoenix, he's got fire, he's kind of like your firebender. So once I think about the characters that are in the game and kind of their themes, I can apply that to some new ideas. You can see them here. I'm not going to list them all out, but there's pirate, monk, earthbender, mind controller, alien, wizard slash witch.
Ooh.
Initially, you might think, oh,
I mean, Sage is kind of like, you know what I'm saying? She do that, all that magical shit.
they're not going to fit in Valorant, but literally there's like ninjas and vampires and all sorts of things.
Okay.
So anyway, once I had all these brainstormed out, I felt super comfortable getting into
Could
them.
Breach not be an earthbender? I mean, I know he doesn't literally move rocks, but the way he like shatters everything and like lifts it up, that's kind of, I mean, that feels like an
phase.
earthbender to me.
I just took the ideas that I felt were the most exciting and had the most potential from the brainstorming phase and kind of made a visual representation for that trope. At this phase, I'm not really thinking about trying to make it look nice and pretty. I'm really just trying to think about how does that theme fit in Valorant. And what I mean by that is, Jett, for example, she's a ninja in Valorant, but a ninja in Overwatch looks like Genji. So really, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm keeping in mind the design sensibilities that they use for Valorant. And as you can see, I'm just putting little stars beside the designs that I think have the most potential and are kind of just the most exciting, and I'm going to move into the next phase with them. So now I'm just going back into my sketchbook just to get a better feel for the characters, going to do some sketches, some iterations. I do this because getting a good feel for the character is a little bit easier to do in the sketchbook, and sometimes happy accidents happen. Oftentimes, through the spontaneous nature of sketching, I'll find cool design solutions and fun shapes and stuff like that. So then what I'll do is I'll scan those pages, I'll bring them into Photoshop, and I'll pick the sketches that I like the most and kind of clean them up a little bit. I really want the posing to be nice, I want it to feel like that character to get that personality out. The biker's gonna feel cool and suave, while the werewolf, he's gotta feel like feral and animalistic. If the pose is really nice, I'll use that for all the iterations, and sometimes it'll even make it all the way through to the final design. The reason why I like using this workflow is you get the looseness and spontaneity of sketching in the sketchbook, but you still have the control of Photoshop. At this point, although I like this Earth guy, while drawing these, I realized he was stepping on the toes of Breach a little too much.
That's what I'm saying, bro.
I couldn't really see a pathway for him to not do that, so I just abandoned him. So now I'm feeling pretty good about the identity of these characters and how they would fit in Valorant. Now I'm going to get into the iteration phase where I flesh out options for specific directions these characters can go. For example, for the biker, I know I want to give him some motocross-inspired armor, but within that, I can still take a few different directions. At this point, I'm looking at some reference, so I'm looking at motocross riders, I'm looking at sport bikers, old school bikers, and even Yakuza. I essentially do that process for all the agents where I try to expunge all the potential ideas and avenues that agent can go. But even still, I need to make sure I'm not stepping on the toes of other agents. For example, I was doing some iterations for the time guy, and I realized his jacket is a little too close to Cypher's jacket, and he's got a pocket watch, which reads a little too close to Cypher's trips. I was feeling kind of stuck and bummed out because I really liked that jacket. I felt like it was really important to the character design. But through doing iterations, I found a jacket that was a little bit more unique and fit his character a little bit better. So yeah, after the iterations, I start the design finalization stage, where I'm basically just taking my favorite parts from all the iterations and making a final design for each of the characters. For the biker, I gave him a Sherpa-lined vest. It kind of feels like an old school biker's vest. And then I gave him some shoulder pads. It kind of breaks up his silhouette, and it's got that motocross foreign language. I also gave him some traditional Maori arm sleeves. Initially, I was going to make him Yoru's long-lost brother, which would obviously make him Japanese, but I decided to have him hail from New Zealand as a member of the indigenous Maori tribe. I also looked at the mongrel mob for reference, their Maori gang in New Zealand. For the werewolf, I gave him this bounty hunter looking jacket lined with fur to kind of push that werewolf feeling. Then I gave him some gauntlets that resemble handcuffs. I imagined he'd be an imprisoned hired gun for Kingdom, and maybe his werewolf form would be him being released from his shackles for a limited time. Also, I gave him a mask to kind of push that muzzled dog feeling. This also thematically ties him to Viper because she's got a gas mask as well. I also thought it'd be cool to push that hunter predator feeling similar to Warwick in League. So I was thinking that gas mask could be his scent amplifier. For the goth agent, I really felt like she had this interesting dynamic of themes, and I really wanted to make sure that showed throughout her design. For example, Chamber's your sniper character, and that shows in his design. He reads as a hitman, and his outfit shows to us that he's a clean and precise guy. Going back to the research from before, with there being a lot of gaming tropes with a modern twist, I thought it'd be sick if she was a necromancer, a witch that summons undead creatures. But it wouldn't really make sense to have zombies roaming around in Valorant, so I thought it'd be cool if she had these little sentient creatures that power up whenever there's death around her. Kinda similar to Reyna's heal and dismiss, which only activate for use when she gets a killer assist. Also, I thought the cat and witch dynamic would kind of reinforce that feeling, so I made her summon these cute little cats. During the iteration phase, I was looking at some punk goth clothing, I was looking at some scene girls from the 2010s, but she was reading a little too modern and not Valorant-y enough. So I did another pass where I was essentially just trying to Valorantify her outfit. I also took a look at some of the other agents to see if there's a common shape language or just a common style amongst all the agents. For the most part, I think everyone has a unique style, but there's a similarity when it comes to the clothes themselves. They're all casual yet militarized, and there's an underlying feeling of sci-fi-ness to them. So I applied what I learned, and at this point I was feeling pretty good about the design, but it didn't have enough pop. She's feeling pretty cool, but I feel like Valorant agents need to be epic. So I turned her leggings and arm sleeves into a tech mesh, and gave it a spiderweb patterning to push that goth feeling. Then I put some patches on her clothes, she's repping her favorite band or anime or something like that. Added a bunch of studs all over her clothes to push that punk feel. Lastly, I just added some purple lace throughout her outfit to have a little bit more harmony and add some color variance. For the fencer, I'm exploring options, so some are a bit more regal and fancy, some a bit more techie, and some a bit more contemporary and casual. He's a prince, so I'm trying to convey that through royal iconography and shape language. And I'm doing some hair designs, but I'm noticing he's somewhat resembling Harbor, so I need to make sure that I go with an option that can never be confused with him. Head design especially is important in Valorant because the icons are so tiny at the top
Unless you're playing Marvel Rivals.
Game, and you never want to make a player confused on which character is which. Anyway, at this point, the design's feeling good, but a few things need to be adjusted. For one, he feels too narrow. He's a fencer, so I think subconsciously I kind of wanted to thin him out to make him elegant, but then he's getting out of the realm of feeling like a guy. So I referenced some swimmer builds where they're still lean, but they're wide at the shoulders, and I applied that to the character. Also, the pose kind of felt awkward, so I changed it to something a little more casual. At this point, I'm definitely getting closer to the final design, but while I liked the idea of the light value suit, it just kind of felt visually wrong and unclear in certain areas. So I changed the color of a lot of the elements from that rose gold to a royal purple. I think that helped a lot with clarity and also making him feel a little more royal. So at this point, the designs are pretty much locked in. I know there's probably going to be adjustments down the road, but at this point I can start the render and kind of just adjust wherever necessary as I'm getting into the final stretch. I really wanted to get a good grip on the rendering style for Valorant, so I just did some studying. I took a look at some of the face sketches by TB Choi, and I watched Ati Gailon's video on his rendering for Killjoy. After doing that studying, I wanted to do a portrait study for the biker to see if I can replicate it. I think these turned out pretty good, and it gave me a lot of confidence getting into the painting process for the rest of the characters. As I spent so much time looking at the renders for the game, something I noticed they all have is VFX, rim lighting, of course that sharp angular rendering style, and they have a cast shadow behind them to make them pop against the background. I need to keep all these things in mind as I'm getting into my renders. For the biker, the plan was always to make him into Yoru's foil, so that definitely inspired the red accents in his hair. I thought having that red and blue, good and bad, yin and yang feel would be good. For the face tattoos, I definitely took inspiration from the mongrel mob I talked about earlier. And for the VFX, I was looking at examples of smoke and other agent renders just to make sure I replicate that visual style correctly. For the time guy, I wanted to put in clock iconography in the VFX just to further communicate that trope to the viewer. Then I noticed in Gecko's render, he's got some tweed pants on, so I created a unique brush specifically to make it easier to replicate the rendering. Then Scott had the idea to make him blind in one eye, and it totally made him feel more magical, more worn, and just more badass in general. For the fencer, I really didn't change much, I just added some more gold trim to add some shapes and color harmony throughout the design. Also, I changed his head pose into something a little more pompous. Lastly, I hadn't finalized his saber yet, so here was where I was exploring some hilt designs and some VFX designs. For the werewolf, he pretty much stayed the same, I just added some movement drawings to show off his abilities a little more. And same for the goth, I didn't change anything on her design, but I just changed the cat designs a little bit and added some drawings to show off her abilities.
Yeah, it's like the cat from Hi-Fi Rush.
And once the designs were finally done, I felt comfortable giving them their names. Wolf, Pierce, Balthazar, Rev, and Morgan. I hope this look into my process is not only coherent, but interesting and insightful. If you've got any questions that I didn't talk about, just leave them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Peace.
WVid. WVid.